when do you remember first getting into music in general?
I was always, in band, probably, I don't know, since whatever, 5th grade or 6th grade when they started you, right? And I played trumpet all through grade school, high school, college. I was a band nerd in high school, marching band, every jazz band, marching band, concert band, just all the ones we had. And I just loved music and just loved performing. I'm actually normally quite shy, but when I have my horn in front of me, I'd go out there in the stands of the football game and blast away solo, versions when the rest of the band was out getting their food and stuff like that. So it was just what opened me up. So I loved music. Initially, I went to USC. I wanted to be a music teacher. And about 2 years into that program, I was like, I can barely learn all these instruments, much less be able to teach them to other people. So they had this recording arts program, and I transferred into that and just started taking off. It was great. I love the technology. I love the music. We had a big SSL console. We had Studer tape machines in college. It was great. And I also started working in studios in LA as an assistant engineer. And it was just a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. It was long hours and late nights, and some paychecks bounced from some of the studios. But I was in LA and really enjoying it.
That's very cool. So when you first started, that was also a big seismic shift in the technology that was being utilized in the studio.
Yeah, when I was an assistant, that's when, and I guess this would be 93, 92, I saw my first computer DAW program or software system that one of the producers rolled into one of the lounges and was doing some editing on. And so I didn't really get into it then, but that's when I first saw it. Eventually I was working in LA as an assistant, and this guy I was working with, I had sort of graduated. I was doing some first engineering on my own, and this guy I was working with named Mike Conception, and you can look him up. There's a movie about him, the Mike Conception story. He said, I know this producer in Virginia Beach, that needs an engineer, and could I recommend you? And I said, sure, yeah, great. And that was Teddy Riley. He introduced me. Teddy was out, I think, the next week working in the studio, and went and met with him and talked to him. And he hired me basically on the spot. So a week later, I had packed everything I owned into a storage unit in LA and was living in an apartment in Virginia Beach and, working 12-hour days with Teddy Riley.
And that would have been right around 93 then?
Yeah, about 93.
Okay, and so, when you got out here to Virginia Beach, I know that the music community flourished out here, but by that point, were there a lot of stars living out in Virginia Beach?
Not a lot of stars living here, no. I mean, it was also a time, I was pretty isolated. We were working such long hours. It was like, we were like vampires, right? We're in the studio, or I'm home asleep or doing laundry or something. So it was about 5 or 6 years that it was just total immersion in Teddy Riley land. But we had all kinds of stars coming through to work with him. MC Hammer and, TLC and, just everyone. He was the remix king, right? So everyone would come to him, and he had his nice studio in Virginia Beach. And that's where I met Serban as well. He had been hired about the same time. And we were just, go all day long, doing mixing, doing recording, doing, Blackstreet Guy, the group Teddy was in, as well as everyone else he was working with.
So, we spoke about this a little bit previously yesterday, but when it came to your work at Teddy's, it wasn't really that you had one role. Everybody kind of seemed to be a jack of all trades, and you came in and you did what needed to be done that day.
We had 3 engineers on staff, myself, Serban, and George Mayers, and we basically set it up as a 12-hour shift, 12 hours on, 12 hours off, and there were sometimes 2 rooms going. So we were just, sometimes we were waiting all day for people to show up, but you're there if you needed to be, and sometimes we were working all night long. But we all three, and Teddy also, Teddy was an excellent engineer as well, mixer. So the four of us together would do the recording, do the mixing, the whole process as a team, really.
And, during that time period here in Virginia Beach, were you guys primarily still working on tape and SSLs at Teddy's?
We were. We had, my whole time there, we had the SSL, a 4K. We had 2 Studer tape machines, 827s, full Dolby SR, 48 channels. And we'd even run Tascam DA88s along with it if we needed to. Teddy was really into computers always. So he had, Notator, which turned into Logic, and he would do all his programming in that. We would record it to tape through the console, play it back from tape into the console, mix on the console. And so, yeah, we were just doing everything then.
So everything got recorded, though. There were never any synthesizers that got left up running live for sounds.
No, we didn't want to do that because we knew we would put up songs and pull them back down and work on a different song all the time. So, Total Recall on the console we had, but we wanted everything to be documented and not playing live because that's just a way to lose things.
Absolutely. So back then, do you remember having to recall the desk often?
Yeah, all the time. Yeah, got really good at that.
Okay.
Matching the little white lines.
Yep.
Right.
So did you guys find yourself into any habits where you would say, okay, let's try to EQ to the line so it doesn't fall in the middle? Or
No, I never thought about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we just did the work. The recall thing was our job afterwards to make sure it all came back. Sometimes it did, sometimes it didn't quite come back, but that's the way it worked back then, right?
Yep, you just move forward, right?
Yeah.
So, at what point did you link up with Serban and decide that you guys were going to start your own studio, MixStar?
So in about 2000, I was working in LA. I had left Teddy, and I was working at Studio Bauton and Tecton Engineering, the studio architects and designers. Mm-hmm. And Serban was getting really busy mixing. He was doing Music Soul Child, Jill Scott, just all kinds of stuff. He was getting busy, and he's like, I could use some help. What do you think? And I was a little bit tired of Los Angeles again, so I said, okay, let's try it. And so I moved here in 2001. And we were working out of a local studio, Winmark. He was, mixing in the control room, and I had a setup in the live room where I would do the prep work and receive files. We would get them then on, DVDs. So I'd load them into the computer, get everything arranged, and just speed up his process so he could do more and more mixing. And it just evolved from there. We decided to find our own place, our own studio. And so we opened here, we got this house and put it together in 2003.
Okay.
And we've been here ever since.
Very, very cool. With the home studio that's more studio than home, this was, in 2003, a pretty revolutionary idea. Did you guys feel any kickback from the industry?
No, they didn't really know what we were doing. I mean, we had worked in houses before. We did an album for Kenna, and that was in about 2000, I think. And he had rented a house in Malibu, and Chad from Neptunes was there, and Kenna and Serban and myself. And so we put together a rig in there and recorded a whole album and started the mixing on it. So we knew we could do it in a house. And since we're not recording here, we don't need great isolation and things like that. So that wasn't a problem. It's just a comfortable space, multiple bathrooms, full kitchen, pool out back, which we never use. But it's just comfortable space to work in.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
So as far as pushback, nobody really knew what we were doing. I mean, we were working remotely already. They wouldn't get bills from Winmark Studios anymore. They'd get bills from MixStar Studios, and no one visited us, no one came, so it didn't matter to the industry.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So you guys have set up shop here. At that point, what does your day-to-day look like?
In the beginning, Yeah, it was just pre-mix work and post-mix work. So Serban could make all the artistic decisions on a mix, and I would take care of all the technical issues of getting it into the computer, because we didn't have internet necessarily, file transfer back then. So we're getting hard drives, we're getting DVDs sent to us, FedExed. That all needs to be loaded and arranged and put together. And then after the mix is done, burning CDs, burning DVDs, sending files out. So that was my job essentially back then at the beginning.
So back then, did you guys have a library that you maintained?
As far as...
Like a room full of DVD cases?
Yeah, well, throw them in a box and throw them in a room, yeah. It wasn't very organized.
Yep.
But yeah, we had to, try and keep track of a lot of stuff.
Very cool. For the folks at home, what did prep look like? They don't know, I don't know. Were you responsible for things like tuning people's vocals, or has that always been part of the, production process and left for other people?
Yeah, it's a gray area. I would try to handle all the technical issues, and any kind of artistic decisions I'd leave to Serban. Mm-hmm. But yeah, there's a gray area where, this needs some timing, this needs some tuning. I would, if I felt comfortable doing that, I would do it, if it hadn't already been done. So essentially I thought of my job as to get the mix sounding like and as good as the rough mix.
Yes.
Right? And then so he can just take off from there. It's already handled. Because, back then people weren't sending us Pro Tools sessions, right? So it's assembling what they did send us, getting into a Pro Tools session, and then making it sound like the rough mix.
Mm-hmm. And I'm assuming for lots of times, people were great about printing stems, and it may have been things like panning and level placement, but were there times that you found yourself, things were very far off and you had to go back and ask for different files, or did you just grab an EQ and...
No, you want to make sure you've got the right files. So if it's very far off, you'd ask them, can you redo this? Is this right? This doesn't sound like the rough mix at all. Things like that.
Were there ever any times that you would get files where the timing would be so far off that you would suggest that someone needed to go back and look at these before move forward? Or
it happens occasionally, but a lot of the producers we're working with back then are very skilled, very detail oriented. So we were lucky. We were working with a lot of good people. Touch of Jazz crew up in Philadelphia and many others. So my best memories of that time are just working with those guys and just really not having to deal with a lot of technical problems because they were on top of it.
That's very cool. And you brought up detail oriented, which is one way that people have described you.
Yeah. I am very detail-oriented, yes. I think that's part of the job. I mean, I think you have to be. You have to be able to not only listen and hear things in a mix or in a rough mix and be able to pick them out and identify and what's going on with it. So artistically detail-oriented, but also technically. I mean, I will reprint a mix if it's 0.1 dB off, just because I want it to be right. And I know next time I load it up, I don't have to remember, did I have to modify this afterwards or not? So, yeah, I am quite detail-oriented. And one of the things that I like to do while I'm mixing my songs in stereo mixing is just, I'll do a whole set of passes just on headphones because I want to hear all the little noises, all the mouth clicks, all the room noises. And then I can make decisions. Do I want to cut it out? Do I want complete silence, or do I want a little room noise to trickle through? So those sort of details and fade outs. I'll spend 5-10 minutes just tweaking a fade out on a song because I just want it, to end perfectly. So I'm quite detail-oriented in that aspect.
Are there any things that stick out to you in particular? Because I only have third-party conversations through our good friend Rory, where, he'll ask for stuff about his mixes, and I'll listen to the before mix. I'm like, this sounds sweet.
Right.
One that always stuck out to me is one of the notes that you gave him is that the background vocals sounded like they were off time with the lead vocal very slightly at this one part of the song. Like, it clearly stuck out to you, where it just went right past me. Are there things like that, flams or anything that,
Yeah, I don't consider myself great at timing things anyway, but yeah, I will hear things and like especially in vocals, percussion timing and drum timing isn't my forte, but and part of that is because some people do it wrong on purpose. So you don't want to necessarily go in and correct a bunch of stuff that they're like, no, that's my vibe, you know.
Yes.
But yeah, for vocals, I really zero in on the vocals. So though I'm not a singer, I can hear the pitch, the time, the emotion that they're putting into it. Right. So I want to make sure that's presented properly.
Very cool. So in a situation like that, when you're zeroing in on the vocals, is the lead vocal the guide that you use for everything else in the song primarily?
When I'm mixing a song, a stereo mix, I basically mix with everything up all the time. I mean, I'll solo things here and there to hear exactly what they're doing, but I'm not starting by pulling all the faders down and starting with kick drum, snare, drums, bass, guitar. I don't do it that way. I start when I have it sounding like the rough mix, then I start, just with everything going, start tweaking things. So, but I'll solo up the vocal and listen through and get all the mouth clicks and noises out. But as far as mixing decisions, panning and things like that, I do it with everything up, because that way you're not causing a problem later on. You could do all this work on the music and it sounds beautiful and amazing, and you throw the vocal in and it's like, doesn't sit right. So just doing it with everything up already all the time, I feel that every decision I make is to the betterment of the song and the mix.
Absolutely. So how, after doing this job for so long, how much do you feel that the role of a great mix is to completely transform a song versus be the last 5 to 10% of the song?
I think there are both approaches. So some producers are very good, very experienced, very detail-oriented themselves. They've set out everything they want to do, and they just need that polish, another set of ears, maybe throw some ear candy in, things like that. Other ones, or other artists are totally let you be free to do your thing, and that's a lot of fun too, because you really get to be creative at that point. So it just depends. You have to have that relationship with the artist and the producer and figure out what they want. Do they want you to make their sound better, or do they want you to transform it and make something that they can't make?
Mm-hmm. Do you have any tricks to figuring out the answer to that question?
No. It's a difficult one. I generally will start by sticking to the rough mix pretty well and enhancing it in little ways. Or if it's someone that knows me and I've worked with before, in that case, I will start with throwing all my ideas in there, do all my wild ideas, and let them know, there's a couple things in here, I'm just experimenting with, and see if you like it or not. So it's a relationship with knowing are they going to freak out if it sounds different, or are they going to appreciate you're trying and they'll just say, no, dial this back, dial that back.
Okay, very cool. So, let's take it back a little bit. So you're out here in Virginia Beach. There was a time when you guys were traveling to Philly, right?
Yeah.
So what was that like? What was happening during that time period?
That's when we were working with Music Soul Child, Jill Scott, with A Touch of Jazz producers in Philly. So they would send us their files down here. We would work on them in the computer, get the mix going, 90%, whatever. Get the whole album ready to go, and then we'd go up to Philly. We'd load up the Pro Tools rigs in the flight cases and drive up to Philly and get in the studio with them. And then we would just sit down with them and go through every mix, and they could make those mix decisions in real time. We didn't have audio movers. We didn't have real time communication then. So they wanted to be in the room with the mix, and we would do that. We'd set up the flight case in front of the SSL console and plug in a couple of patch cables and grab the big volume knob, and that was what the console was for.
So were you going through the external monitor, or were you actually going and printing stems that went out through the desk?
No, we were just 2-channel out of Pro Tools into the desk into the big volume knob.
Okay. And, what's the first big song that you guys remember doing that was done strictly inside of the DAW like that?
It would have been one of the Jill Scott or Music Soul Child projects. I'm not sure which, but it would be pretty early in that era. Some of the producers for Music Soul Child wanted to, so Serban we'd go up there, we'd do the mix with the producers. He would print stems back because he knew they might want to tweak it later. Some of the guys wanted to mix on the console, right? That's just, they wanted to feel things under their fingers. And so he did a few mixes where he did print into, through the console, through the mix, stems back into Pro Tools, and then would tweak that later. I think that's the point where we realized that, we didn't need the console at all, right? You could mix through it, but if you're going back to stems anyway and tweaking those, that you could have skipped that whole process. We never mixed on the console after that, and that was just because those producers wanted to do it that way. They were comfortable that way.
And from what I know about your guys' work, it seems that you guys have found a workflow that works for you, and found it back then, and have continued it to this day.
Yeah, we found something that worked. We found a relationship between the two of us that worked, as well as just the way we're getting the sessions, we're setting it up, we're mixing in Pro Tools, sending it out to clients. Yeah, it was working back then. We don't need to change much about it.
I come to MixStar and I have big consoles, and I have had this age-old debate on if you need a console.
Right.
And truly, places like this are inspiring in a completely different way where, all you really need are good ears, right?
Yeah. I mean, this is a tiny room. My Atmos system is tiny. It's super near field. I can nearly touch, all the speakers. So I've had my Atmos mixes go to people to listen to it at Blackbird, with their huge room, and they're like, sounds amazing, right? So it's just experience and knowing how things are going to translate. We've been on these Pro X for 25, I don't know, almost 30 years maybe, right? So you just get used to them. You know the way they sound. You know how things translate on them. We're in the same room. We're not traveling to different studios. And that's what brings the consistency is you're always in a room you're comfortable with, in a system you're comfortable with, and you avoid that, area of having to learn a room, learn a console, learn another system.
The tools that you guys use at MixStar, things like Metric Halo Channel Strip and the Pro X, you guys have been on for years.
Yeah.
Something like the Pro X, do you guys blow them often?
Yeah, this one's a little blown right now. We've got a stock of replacement parts, woofers and tweeters downstairs. We don't try to protect them.
Yeah.
We use them. They're meant to be used. So, yeah, they do get blown.
So when you say a little blown, how long has it been like that?
A month.
Okay, because mine's been a little blown for like 3.5 years.
Yeah. Right.
I've actually kind of started using it as a crutch. Like I know how far I can push the low end before the left one starts to fart out, and then when it does, I'm like, oh.
Right. The woofer replacements are getting harder to source and more expensive. So I'm trying to make it last.
You guys have a stockpile of good ones and a stockpile of bad ones?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, we do.
Very cool.
Well, we don't know what to do with the bad ones. They're not necessarily worth reconing because that's an expensive process itself. We thought maybe we'd take the magnets out of them and do something cool, but that's hard to tear apart.
When it came to making this transition from your stereo work into Atmos work, it really just seems like you changed a little bit about how the monitoring worked in here, but not too much changed, right?
Right. Well, so Serban and I, when Atmos started coming around, we kind of had a conversation between the two of us. What would we want to hear? And what we wanted was to take the stereo mix that we've worked so hard on getting and tweaked for days and days with artists, and just get immersed in that, right? We don't want a circus of things flying around. We don't want it to sound different than the stereo mix. So I I set up the system in here and I started experimenting and figuring out how to do it. And with that in mind, that we wanted to stay true to the stereo mix, but immerse you in the song. And so it's not necessarily like you're watching a performance and you're in the audience. It's not that you're, sitting in with the band. It's just that you're part of that experience of the song.
Besides Serban's work and now some work that you're doing with Alex on the Atmos side, you've been doing a lot of stuff from outside MixStar as well.
Yeah. I'll get stems sent in from other producers, other projects, and do that as well. So I did a bunch of stuff for BTS back, several years ago. That was a big project. And it was quite difficult because the way they did stems then was the Korean songs, they would send about 5 stems. So like lead vocal, all other vocals, rhythm track, bass, and keys. And it's really hard to figure out ways to immerse yourself in that when it's all printed together. So I started developing some techniques of my own then to figure out ways to make that work. And I think some of it worked okay. I will get other stems from other producers and do Atmos mixes for them as well.
Very cool. And you've also started delving into doing a lot of legacy work as well?
There's been some. We did Michael Jackson's Thriller album, which was great. Serban got the multi-tracks. He did new mixes from the multi-tracks. We matched as close as we could the original Bruce Swedien mixes. And then those were created just for the purpose of me being able to go to Atmos with them. And so we did that. We did the Atmos of the Thriller album, and it was really good.
That's very cool. And when it comes to the Atmos work, what are you most excited about? Are you excited about the legacy work, or are you excited about, taking part in making new history?
I think all of it. I mean, the legacy work is there's not a lot of it coming here. I think other people are doing it, and they have a lot more, time and space to do it. We're pretty busy, so I do like doing that, but it is a lot of work. We did some legacy stuff for Lady Gaga as well, and for Imagine Dragons. So they would send us what they had, and it might be stems, but it might be a raw multitrack. And I would have to recreate the stereo mix from the raw multitrack, figure out what parts they're using, figure out what reverbs, figure out everything, right? Mm-hmm. And then get a stereo mix that matched as best I could, and then start Atmos on that. So it's a lot of work to do that. So we did that for some Imagine Dragons stuff, some Lady Gaga stuff. And I know, remembering back, I know there were some problems with a couple of the songs, like, oh, I missed that. That radio effect on that Lady Gaga song, I missed it, right? But, you do what you can with what you're given. It was a lot of very raw stuff. And some songs are missing, the big Warner Brothers Fire and other things. Some songs, they don't have multitracks, they don't have stems, they don't have anything for. And we've tried to do even stem separation from stereo tracks to just get something out there for some things.
Has that been productive?
It's a last resort, and it's just to sort of complete an album. Say it's an Atmos album, I think. Mm-hmm. You can do some things with it, but it's pretty rough. Yeah. Not
ideal.
No, not at all.
Well, I find it very interesting that parallels between where you started here at MixStar and your journey of, doing prep for Serban's mixes and stuff, and having to try and match those rough mixes to some of those parallels with what we saw in your video making, the Atmos work for David Bendeth's song happen. It's about going after and trying to match that original mix. And, instead of handing it off to Serban now, you get the opportunity to take it and put it in a whole new space.
Yeah, I mean, that's, I think, one of the great skills and ways to learn is to force yourself to recreate something, because you have to listen to such detail. Is this reverb exactly right? And it's hard to pick out a reverb when a whole mix is playing. Is it too bright? Is it too dark? Is it too long? And you have to do that with every single sound. I mean, there would be times when I would just loop 2 bars over and over and over again and just nitpick that section of the vocal until I got it right, and then loop the next 2 bars, right? because you never know what you're missing unless you can hear every single second of every single sound of every song, right?
So this is where that detail-oriented
Yes.
reputation comes in.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. You just have to get in there and care enough about it to spend the time and do it the right way instead of trying to fast track it.
So did you ever find yourself in a situation where you needed to call out to the engineer, the producer who sent you over the files and say, hey, what is that reverb?
I didn't do it. Yeah, yeah, we didn't do it. I mean, they actually sent us for Michael Jackson. They sent us, photos of the track sheets and
Can
the
I see
console
those?
tape. I could dig them up somewhere. Yeah, the console tape and the track sheets and all that stuff. But it's not really helpful because you still don't know the settings and things and stuff like that. So it's almost easier to kind of do it by ear than to.
They didn't have the
trying to
recall
reach out.
notes?
I don't think we had full recall notes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I always like looking at other people's recall notes to figure out if they're boosters or cutters.
Yeah.
What do you think that you are? Are you a booster or are you a cutter?
A lot of both, actually, I think. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
The one thing I will say that's consistent outside of, seeing Meld now this trip is Metric Halo Channel Strip.
Mm-hmm.
So, tell us when you first interacted with Channel Strip.
I mean, I think that's one of the first plugins I ever saw. It was that was recreating the console in Pro Tools.
Yep.
When we started, back in 2000, whatever, that was it. Put that on, that's your EQ, that's your compression, that's your channel strip, and, start working from there.
There's a lot of rumors that are built up around yours and Serban's work. Everybody wants to know all these secrets. And, sometimes I believe that these secrets are larger in their own minds than in real life. How do you feel about that?
They're definitely, definitely larger in their minds than in real life. There are no or maybe very few, a couple of secrets. And the secrets aren't even secret.
So are you going to tell them about how you guys use digital tape here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've got, we've got our digital tapes here, right? That's what we're running off of.
Yeah, so everybody who thinks that the digital is actually different at MixStar, you're right. It's tape.
It's sort of like a conspiracy theory thing. That there has to be a reason why they're doing it different, better, more successfully, whatever. It's experience, skill, and good ears, and hard work.
Absolutely.
This David Benda song, I created a new master bus for it, right? Yeah. Because secrets. You don't have to use the same thing that anyone else is using. You can use anything. You work into it and you figure out what it's doing and how to use it. So our master bus, has changed over the years. It continues to change because producers are sending us stuff with their things on it. And some things that a producer sends you can take off and some things you can't because it's become part of the sound.
Yeah.
So it's continuous. It's never 100% the same, but it's a basis to start from and then modify as needed. Mm-hmm. But, the whole thing about, it's different than anyone else's or it's different than is available to anyone else isn't true. It's just, we've found something that works for us and we're comfortable and experienced enough with it that we know when it needs modification, when it doesn't, and what sounds good and what doesn't.
Absolutely. And all that comes back down to the years and years of skill.
It's the same thing as getting used to a set of speakers, right? 20 years in front of the same set of speakers, you know what they sound like. 20 years in front of the same set of plugins, you know what they sound like.
Yes.
It's repetition, it's experience, it didn't work on this song, why not? It does work on this song, and it's just learning all of the differences that are presented in every song, because every song is different. So you learn what works, what doesn't, and use that experience to move forward. Every time, change what's needed, don't change what's not needed.
Absolutely. Being able to watch you work, one thing that I saw yesterday is that there was new stuff. It wasn't just, old stuff. You guys are clearly trying out things every day and, finding what you like. And
there's new tools that do new things that are fun to play with. And that's part of mixing is having fun. I want to see what this, MBSI does, right?
Yep.
I want to see what this Soundtech EQ does because, we want to evolve too. We want to, not just stay where we are and have everyone pass us by. We're staying ahead, or we're trying to. So everything that that's us is the past. We're still going into the future. So yeah, I try new things all the time, develop my own new techniques, play with plugins, play with effects, play with the way a mix is put together even.
So if you find a cool effect that you're really excited about, do you go downstairs and tell the dudes when you're standing around coffee, or do you hit them up on the intercom and tell them?
I'll probably hit them up on the intercom. Yeah.
I think that's one of the really cool things about MixStar is that, everybody's talking to each other from the rooms.
Right. Yeah. We have the intercom on a lot of the time, just hearing kind of what the other guy's doing. And if someone says, hey, what are you doing for lunch? Or, I need help with this or that, we'll just go down and check it out. So it's a little background noise and a little distraction. Sometimes you can concentrate too hard. You need some background noise to kind of take your brain out of the one, area of concentration and let your subconscious, right, do some of the work.
So do you ever find yourself just listening to Bryce's YouTube videos or something that's happening in another room without realizing
sometimes,
it?
yeah. Or sometimes I'll just have the TV on and just have that as background noise even while I'm mixing sometimes. It takes my brain into another area where I can subconsciously do things.
So, one thing that I'm really excited about is you've been doing more and more stereo work.
Yes.
And your stereo mixes are absolutely incredible and everybody should go listen to them. Tell us something that you're excited about.
I'm finishing up a new Gale album now. She's a Puerto Rican artist. I did her first album and the second one's coming out soon. It's really fun to work with her and with Dallas K, her producer. Mm-hmm. They let me try my wild ideas and they tell me when to dial back or when to, go for it. So I really enjoy working with her. It's challenging because, you have to make all those decisions, and I want to please them and please the artist and please the producer. So I'm really concentrating on getting all of their notes, the way they want them, and they'll send me, email notes. Here's change this, change that. We Ani, I just mixed a song for Jurisdiction. Aji, both from American Idol alumni, been working on that. Been doing some stuff for UK artists Louis Fitzgerald and Mackenzie McKay.
Okay.
So neat stuff, sort of little hip hop oriented pop.
Okay, very
stuff. Cool. So yeah, I've been getting into a lot more of my own stereo mixing, and I really enjoy it. It's a little more stressful because you deal much more closely with the artists and producers. Mm-hmm. But you're part of the creation of it, which is fun.
Awesome. And, we're definitely going to put some links down below so people can go check out some of those mixes. But if someone was interested in working with you, is there a way for them to get in touch? Is there a manager to reach out to?
I do have a manager, Becky Scott. People can find me if they want to find me. So I'm open to work.
Perfect. I think that that's one of those things that, goes with the mystery and the air of this place is that some people believe that you're, hard to approach, mm-hmm. where really, I think that you're a relatively personable guy and you're actually on the internet a lot. There's a Gearspace thread that you have found a home at. Tell us a little bit about that.
I mean, that's my place to fraternize and vent, right?
Yeah.
Said originally I wanted to be a teacher, right? So I still enjoy that. Part of it is educating and helping and mentoring a bit. So yeah, I'm all over the Gearspace thread for Serban mixes and a few others. But yeah, that's just my spot to kind of get out into the world. I'm in this room alone most of the day, so that's my link to the world.
Yeah, I love it, and before we became friends, I just have to say it was such a resource. There's a wealth of information in there if people are willing to take the time and go back through.
I talk a lot about sort of my philosophy that I've developed right there. So I'm not telling you necessarily what I'm doing, but I tell you more why or how I'm approaching something or how I'm thinking about something. I mean, there's some specific techniques and specific examples, but a lot of it is just me kind of trying to explain the philosophy, the reasons why, not turn this knob this much to get this vocal sounding that, right? But why do you want it to sound that way? What's the problem you're trying to fix? I like to make people think, and I think that they will learn more if they do it rather than are told what to do.
Absolutely. For a young engineer who's at home, who's watching this for the first time, if you could give them any piece of advice, where would you start with them?
It sort of goes back to what we talked about before: listening, recreating, matching things. Develop your ear to be able to concentrate on all of those details and experiment, learn, what does this reverb sound like? What does that reverb sound like? And figure out what reverb they're using, right? Match it. And then you've learned something. You've learned what reverb you like on that snare drum. So it's really that developing your ability to match and teach yourself what's happening in the song by doing the work to match what's happening. So a lot of people, they'll get stems off the internet and do that work that way. They find stems, sometimes legitimate, sometimes not, right? Even some sessions I think have been leaked out there that people have access to. So some people are using those to match, to learn, to figure out what's happening in the mix.
Yes.
And I think that's an excellent way to teach yourself, and just doing that work, working on a real professional song, right, and matching it is, I think, a valuable way to train yourself.
I 100% agree. People have tons of questions, and I only want you to give out as much information as you would like to give out to them. But there's something that Dave Pinzado does at the end of his interviews, which is called the batter's box, which he'll throw out something, and then you throw out the first thing that comes to your mind, whether it's a plugin or a piece of gear or a frequency you like. But say, if I were to say something like snare drum, what's the first thing that comes to mind?
Chest. I want that thump.
Okay, very cool. And is there a range that typically lives for you? Is that 125? Is that 200?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not so good at that kind of thinking, right?
Yeah.
I like to grab things and move them. So I'll grab the EQ graphic and just move it. I don't necessarily think
Is this
of
channel
things.
strip? Is that where you're
usually.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Or more recently, Pro Q, because you can do some trickier things with it. So one is a standard tool and one's a surgical tool, right?
Yeah.
And when people send me notes, work on this 4K range or something, it doesn't translate into my head immediately. I have to figure out what they're talking about.
Okay. And do you typically do that the same way that all of us Neanderthals do, by making a super tight cue and boosting around and sweeping it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a good way to do it. Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Solo it up and sweep it around.
I don't feel so alone now.
Like I said, there's no secrets. There's no special techniques. There's no special knowledge. It's working hard. It's learning your tools and doing the same thing everyone else does.
So bass guitar.
Fuzz. I want like distortion and fuzz.
Okay. And do you have some tools that you're typically leaning on towards, grinding some stuff up?
Yeah, I mean, adding some distortion, getting those string, sounds out of it. The plucks and the things like that. Characters is a nice one.
Yep.
From Metric Halo. But I'll just experiment with things and find something that I like.
Very cool. Of course, everybody's end all be all, lead vocal.
I just want it natural. I want to present the singer as an exceptional singer, right?
Yes.
So I want to take out all of their mistakes, but I want to leave in all their humanness. I want it to sit in the mix nicely, but I want it to be present and pleasing.
Yep. And I got to look at your mix that you did, for the stereo mix of David's yesterday, and that lead vocal was what I would consider treated very naturally. There was a compressor, a little bit of filtering, maybe one band of EQ, nothing crazy.
Yeah, a couple bands of EQ. It was recorded well, so it wasn't difficult to deal with, but you don't need to go to 5, 6, 7 plugins on every vocal. If it sounds good, it's good. Just do some gentle EQ, boost some, maybe some high mid so that diction comes out, right? So you can understand it. But, know when it's right and don't mess with it. Not everything needs to be touched.
Understood. So if you can only have one reverb.
Well, maybe Altiverb because it has everything in it.
Okay.
I'll cheat.
Yeah, I feel like that's a cheater answer, but.
Oh, let's see. One reverb. You mean like one plugin or one type of sound?
Yeah, just, if you're on a desert island, do you want a plate? Do you want a 480? Do you want a, hall, a cathedral? Where's your head at?
I think I want a plate. I think it's just that's a modern kind of pop modern sound we've all become used to.
Absolutely. So what does the future look like for you?
I just am enjoying, where I'm at. I think, I'm enjoying doing more stereo mixing and getting more involved in that. I'm loving doing the Atmos work, and I hope that keeps going. It's a tricky area because some people are doing it super cheap, and some people are doing it not very well. And so there's some blowback and some pushback from some artists who don't like it and don't want to try it. So I'm just trying to create Atmos versions that are liked, acceptable, good, and I think the presentation of them in the future in headphones and other media will get better. But yeah, some people don't like it, so it's hard every time you deal with that to find a way to convince them this is actually interesting, fun, and good.
Well, one thing that I will say, and this is just a personal preference, and I've said this before to you, but there's only a few Atmos mixers whose work I truly enjoy and truly go out of my way to listen to. And yours happens to be one of them. And I think that it's because of how you present the music, and we've talked about the strong front wall before, and there's just something so effortless and natural about the way that you mix in Atmos that I really, really appreciate. So thank you.
Well, thanks. Yeah, I've been doing it long enough that I kind of know what I want to do before I do it. So it's really my hands are just following what I already have planned in my head. When I hear a song, I start to think this would be good there, this would be good there. I want to split this up and make this immersive. It's almost like sometimes I can't keep up with the thoughts that I want to do with the actions of actually physically doing it. So but that's part of what I enjoy is that I have a vision for it and I want to see that come through.
Understood. Very cool. And how long does it take to, accomplish that vision typically, would you say?
It depends on the song. Some are very complicated. Some songs, the setup to get it into a format that you can do Atmos with, it takes longer than doing the Atmos mix because with the way people are doing complex routing these days, I've got to break down the routing of each sound that I want to separate through all of the process that goes through and not necessarily print a stem of it, but get it into a 2-channel format where I can send it somewhere instead of going through multiple buses, folders, and things like that. So I'll spend a lot of time dissecting the mix, the session, getting rid of things that aren't necessary, consolidating volume rides from a folder to an actual audio track, right? Things like that, and spend a lot of time doing that so I have a clean set of sounds that I can easily route around. Atmos is mainly just moving sound around. right? It's advanced panning, right? So I just want to get those sounds in a format where I can move them without having to go through, folders and buses and groups of tracks. I need to get those things separated. So the setup time for some of these complex sessions is, it may be half a day, and then I can get the Atmos mix done in 3 hours or so.
Okay. So if you came in and everything was all ready to go, you would think maybe
3 hours probably of just panning, making those decisions, listening back, making sure my levels are correct.
And how does that compare to do your stereo work?
That's a lot faster than stereo work. Stereo work, I'm spending a day or two on and off, broken up over whatever period of time I get notes back. But, 8 hours, 12 hours mixing on a song wouldn't be unusual over the course of whatever, a couple of weeks or a couple of days.
Okay. And in that sort of situation, are you going after like one big 8-hour chunk and then you've got 4 hours worth of notes, or are you able to knock it out in say 4 hours?
Yeah. I'll spend maybe 4 hours just getting my first pass ready to go. And then I'll leave it and I'll come in the next day, fresh ears, take a listen to it, decide if I'm ready to send it to the artist. And so when I'm ready to send it to the artist, they get it and I don't touch it again until I hear back from them. And then it, depending on what kind of notes they have, it may be 5 minutes, it may be 5 hours, right? If they want to send new parts and you integrate those, that can be more time consuming. If they have broad ideas of how they want things different, that can be time consuming. But if you get that first pass really close to what they like, then it's, maybe an hour or two, little tweaks. I may spend 5 minutes on it, change one thing, send it out, wait another hour or two or a day, get another note back. So it's really broken up over a long period of time.
When it comes to something like vocal automation, do you feel like you have to do just as much vocal automation in Atmos as you would in stereo, or?
No, once the automation is done in stereo, I can just commit it and not have to deal with any of that again.
Yep.
So I'm taking all of those artistic mix decisions away, and I'm just doing artistic and technical immersive decisions at that point.
Okay, very cool. Well, thank you so much for having us here. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's been great.